The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. Happy Monday, everyone. It is the Nerdcast News Report for Monday, March the 3rd, 2025. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. It is a wrestling-heavy episode of the Nerdcast News Report today, as WWE had their Elimination Chamber on Saturday, and it was certainly newsworthy to say the least. We mentioned on Friday when we did our brief preview of the Nerdcast News Report for Monday and the Elimination Chamber over the weekend that Triple H had promised a industry-altering event this weekend, and we were a little concerned that there might be some hyperbole in that, but as it turned out, that was actually pretty accurate. Give Triple H credit for kind of nailing that on the head. But we're going to talk about that. And then a little bit of other news this morning as we get your Monday started off right with all the nerdy news you need to know. And joining me in studio on this Monday morning is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It's going. Man, Monday mornings seem to come earlier than any other morning and any other day of the week. It's truly amazing. But it's the first Monday of March. Pretty excited about that. We are through February, and yeah, kind of a big wrestling event. It definitely was kind of industry altering, and it didn't wind up with The Rock putting himself in the Elimination Chamber match and winning the title. So,
which was always a possibility.
You really didn't know. I thought when you saw that promotional poster for Elimination Chamber and it featured The Rock, Travis Scott, and John Cena, I kind of had a feeling one of those guys would end up winning the chamber, but I wasn't sure which of the three, despite Cena being the only one scheduled to be in the match. So, yeah, kind of a fun show and a lot to talk about from it.
Yeah, and it turned out that was actually some foreshadowing as to how the event was going to go, and we're going to get this thing started at the end of the Elimination Chamber because that's really where all the news happened. And it was John Cena, LOL, Cena wins, but certainly in a much different way than that has ever been true, as John Cena outlasted 5 other men to win the Elimination Chamber, earning a right to face Cody Rhodes for the undisputed WWE Championship at WrestleMania. And then, yeah, the match was great, and I don't want to overshadow that, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about that once we kind of get through this point, because it was an excellent chamber match that I fear that a lot of people are going to forget because of what happened in the aftermath. But in the aftermath, Cody comes out to congratulate Cena. Of course, The Rock and Travis Scott come out so The Rock can get his answer on whether Cody's going to sell his soul to him. Cody, in no uncertain terms, told him no. And then
that was an industry-changing
the F-bomb there on WWE programming, certainly a choice there. And Cena acted like he was going to congratulate and did congratulate Cody for standing up to The Rock. And then, of course, his expression changes, as you saw in our thumbnail, where The Rock basically slit his throat and Cena kicked him in the nuts, and then they proceeded to beat him down and bloody him up, and that's pretty much how the show went off the air, was those 3, as it turned out, with Travis Scott just kind of hanging out there, standing over Cody to end the Elimination Chamber. And there's so much to unpack from this. I first off, again, Triple H was right. This was industry altering. I think we were concerned that was going to be hyperbole. It's a lot of the things The Rock has done supposedly tied into this. Whether that's 100% true or not, I don't know. The press conference afterward was certainly interesting. And then you have Cena, who has decided finally, in his final year with 9 months to go in his career, that he's going to embrace the darkness and basically for his chance to get the 17th title, he's going to do it as dirty as possible to try to get there. Basically foreshadowed by his Royal Rumble post-match press conference where he said, "I deserve it. I'm going to be in the Elimination Chamber." It kind of all laid the groundwork for this, the foundation, if you will. Mike, your overall impressions on kind of the afterbirth, if you will, to borrow a phrase from Jim Cornette, of everything that happened at the Elimination Chamber in the men's match.
Yeah, it's hard to not get NWO vibes from it. I'm not sure which one Travis Scott is, as far as Kevin Nash or Scott Hall.
Dennis Rodman,
maybe, but I mean, if you compare it to the original three, I don't know how he fits into that equation. I'm not going to say we didn't suspect this could happen, because when you start talking about who the potential most likely winners could be, the second you say Cena, you're like, well, how does that play into the whole Rock situation?
Yeah.
The initial reports was that the Rock segment was going to happen in the middle of the show, which I don't think was ever really real, because it doesn't make sense with how the storyline played out.
Right.
It would have been weird to have that whole thing go down, and then you go into the chamber match already knowing what Cody's decision was. I think it would have been strange, but yeah, it's hard to compare it to, even though you're going to, the Hogan turn, because we have the power of hindsight, and we see what the NWO has done, even to this day, as far as merchandise sales, and just it was one of the biggest things in what was, by a lot of people's estimations, the biggest time period of wrestling ever. What does this do? Do they find some way to further monetize it? Do they come up with some new brand identity for these three individuals? I don't know, but I think when you now look at some of those matchups that we're looking forward to for Cena in his final 9 months, it's even more intriguing now when you start looking at it from the angle of him being a heel against a lot of these top stars who were likely heels the first time Cena wrestled them.
Well, unfortunately, his first confrontation is probably going to be with R-Truth, who is definitely not doing well with this news.
Yeah.
It was his childhood hero. And
never meet your heroes, man.
It's 100% the case. But, even like, CM Punk, obviously they had a great interaction in the chamber. There was a lot of respect there. Yeah. Now you have Punk. And, as you talk about people who, because I think we both believe that this eventually is going to end in some sort of redemption arc at the end, where he comes back to babyface to finish out his career by the end of the year. And you feel like Punk is one of those people who is kind of the voice of reason, who would be able to kind of steer him back that direction once he presumably fails against Cody, which is kind of what I expect to happen, because that is the ultimate story of pro wrestling, is that when you go to take shortcuts to get what you want, eventually you fail. That's, the good versus evil, everything that goes along with that. But yeah, it's completely fascinating. It has permeated all of entertainment. Like, people who are AEW fans on X and other social media are posting about it, because it's something that nobody thought was going to happen. And certainly when he announced he was coming back for a year, everybody expected it to be a victory lap. I'm going to show up. I mean, it's very similar to when he came back the one time we saw him in Cincinnati, where he's doing these like multi-man tag matches and he's just clowning it up for the crowd. And it's just, just fun for everybody. And clearly that's not what he wanted to do in this situation. And it definitely adds a level of intrigue to this final run that he's going to be on. And
I think a lot of him doing this is about fun, though.
Yeah.
I think it's him getting to play out a character he never got the chance to do, because he was so much the white meat babyface linchpin of the latter stages of the Vince era of WWE. Like, there was just no room for him to not be John Cena.
Well, and I think eventually, I don't know how soon he'll be back on TV. The Rock mentioned after, I should say Dwayne mentioned after, because that was definitely not The Rock in the press conference. That was definitely Dwayne Johnson doing a Dwayne Johnson press conference, but
which was entertaining.
Absolutely. We were up past midnight to watch that thing. It was totally entertaining. But he mentioned that Cena was already on his way to Africa for something. So, I mean, he's just, had flown in from Budapest that day and then, was flying out. So I don't know when we'll see him back on TV again, probably in the next couple of weeks on SmackDown. But, I think his motivations are going to be very obvious. The obvious motivation, the one that's clearly in front, is that he basically said, I deserve to win 17. I'll do whatever it takes. This is whatever it takes to him to be able to do that, happy, smiley John Cena can't get there. But the underlying, motivation, I think you mentioned it, but it's also worth mentioning, is that Cody is the white meat babyface that they always wanted John Cena and Roman Reigns to be.
Yeah.
That was what Vince always wanted, was the next Hulk Hogan, the guy that, supposedly was everybody's hero and everybody loved him. And even Hogan at the end of his WWF run were getting boos because people were just tired of him. That's just the nature of it. So you have Cody, who just seems to be able to do no wrong. Like, the dude is literally, everything he's involved in, no matter how dumb you might think it is to start with, it works out. He's come back as the conquering hero after leaving the company. is the most over he's ever been in his life.
He survived losing at WrestleMania the first time to Reigns.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure he was going to be able to.
Yeah.
But he maintained that momentum, and now a year removed from his title win, he's just as over as ever.
And the situation where Cody turned The Rock down is basically him telling WWE, no, I'm not going to do what's best for your company. I'm going to do what's best for me and my fans. That's the anti-Cena. Cena was a company guy.
Yeah.
I will do whatever I need to do for the company, what's best for business. He even used that quote at the end of the Royal Rumble. So this is also Cena angry, jealous of Cody for being able to do something that he's never been able to do for WWE, which is to tell them no. And that's going to be part of the resentment and part of the motivation for the storyline that, he thinks that, Cody isn't a good company guy. He's not that guy. And Cena's always been that guy, and look what it got him.
They've never had to brand Cody as polarizing.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was a term they threw around for Cena all the time and Reigns because you never felt like their ascension was organic.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because taking nothing away from either of those guys, there's nothing wrong with them, but you always kind of felt like somewhere in the program it was like, hey, you have to cheer for these guys. These are the guys you have to cheer for. There's no wiggle room there. You're going to love them. We're going to make sure of that. And with Cody, because of the years where it felt like he was relegated to lower mid-card, he had to leave, reinvent a character that they allowed him to keep upon his return. You can't not feel that's organic.
And that's the thing, is despite the fact the company has pushed him in the way that they have, obviously, over the last 2 years to get him to that level, it's very much in the front of mind of all wrestling fans, the journey he's had to go on, like you said, in the mid-card, even though he's got this last name, even though that he was really liked in the company. Like, they liked him, but not as the world champion. They liked him as a mid-card guy or a comedy guy. And then he has to go away and create AEW and do all that, but still had the desire to get back to WWE. So he comes back. And again, Vince was there when he came back. This was right at the end of the Vince era. So even then,
he sold Vince on the Cody Rhodes American Nightmare package.
For sure. And even then, though, did he really sell Vince on winning the world title? Because I don't think anybody really knows that, because Vince was then shortly gone. And obviously Triple H realized the plan. And they have him lose to Reigns. So even then, like, the fans think they're just not gonna. It was the Kenny Omega effect against Kazuchika Okada and the 2 out of 3 falls. They're not gonna put this guy over. There's just no way. And that's when you get that moment like you had last year, where it's just once they finally do it, he's our guy now. And seemingly no matter what Cody does, it just doesn't affect the support of the fans. Which again, John Cena as a character would have a big problem with that,
and he should.
And
honestly,
the question will be whether anybody else will Reigns join up with these guys, because Reigns also is in that same boat. A guy who, basically eventually had to do his own thing to get over as the tribal chief, but for years was basically shoved down people's throats and people didn't like it. So
I mean, that's the next thing. Is Travis Scott the third man, or is Roman Reigns the third man? Like, what do you do with that? Because I know they mentioned in the press conference, The Rock did, that Travis Scott really wants to be involved in the product.
And he's been training, supposedly.
Yeah.
So,
but to me, I see him in a WrestleMania match against Bad Bunny.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's the match for him.
That match would move so many eyeballs. Like,
Absolutely.
as much as it maybe wouldn't be a masterpiece, like
maybe they can get Jay Balvin to be involved.
maybe you can do the ring announcing for the match. But yeah, so we'll talk more about this, obviously, for the weeks to come, because as this plays out, I think it's going to be really interesting. But I don't want to lose sight of the overall Chamber match, because obviously, we had some other things go on. We had first off, a really good match. We had Drew McIntyre, again, getting rolled up and pinned. I love his Tomohiro Ishii meme that he posted on social media. You had Logan Paul try to hit the buckshot lariat on Punk, and Punk reverses it into a GTS and pins him, which, no irony lost there.
A lot of commentary there on the state of the industry, I think.
You have Punk and Cena basically teaming up to eliminate Seth Rollins, who then hangs around in the cage long enough to stomp Punk and allows Cena to choke him out for the win. So clearly you're continuing on with the Punk-Rollins issue into WrestleMania, which has been rumored that it was going to be a triple threat with those two and Roman Reigns. I don't know how they're going to work Reigns into that necessarily, but he's so tied to both of them that I think it'd be pretty easy.
Yeah, you can make that work.
But just overall, your general thoughts before we move on to the other matches on the men's chamber match, kind of the match part of it.
It's funny because you had this card with 4 matches, and 3 of the matches involved really big angles or returns that potentially could have taken your attention away from what was going on in the match itself. I don't think it succeeded with the Owens-Zayn match because that match was just ridiculous. But with this one, yeah, I mean, obviously it's hard to not talk about what happened afterwards, but the match itself was totally fine. I think you're seeing kind of the beginning of what's going to be the McIntyre Priest match because it was Priest that rolled him up, correct?
Yep.
Rollins, man, like if he just would have left well enough alone, we could have prevented Evil Cena from emerging. I think. He's kind of the dude that ruined everything.
He's like the walking butterfly effect. Like, he just steps on something and all of a sudden John Cena's a bad guy or Roman Reigns is the tribal chief. Like, it just seems to be the way he goes about it.
He's the guy that thinks of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. And,
yes.
I tried to think of something that couldn't hurt us, and here's where we are now. But I think back now to the Firefly Funhouse match.
Yeah.
And it's how does heel Cena in reality compare to the NWO Cena in that match? Because I feel like even that match couldn't have predicted the visual of evil Cena standing over Cody Rhodes.
Yeah, for sure. And I did see there were a ton of comments online. You could certainly search for those. I saw that like Natalia commented like, hey, I lived through 100 episodes of Total Divas, so I kind of saw it coming, which I thought was pretty funny. But it was just unbelievable scene, and the fallout is going to be even more so. The memes are epic already. Join our Discord because Chris has posted some memes in there already from Evil Cena, a Break-A-Wish Foundation, things like that. So
I just think more people need to be comparing this to Ernest Goes to Jail. Yeah. I think Evil Cena as Evil Ernest makes all the sense in the world to me.
I don't know why we haven't rebooted those movies with Cena in the role. Like, I feel like he would absolutely nail it. And
now's our chance.
Now is the chance to do it. But wild end of the Premium Live event for sure. And we'll be spending more time on this in the weeks leading up to WrestleMania. But we don't want to forget to talk about some of the other big moments from Elimination Chamber. And I think, the thing that got everything kicked off was right at the beginning of the Women's Elimination Chamber before the gates were closed, that Jade Cargill made her triumphant return. Looked like she was going to lay out Liv Morgan. Instead, she brutalizes Naomi and takes her out of the match. And, you had Bianca Belair selling it in the pod, whether she's in on it or not. I think that's going to be the end game, is that Belair framed Naomi and Belair is the one who actually did it, and she's going to turn heel, and that's going to set up your heel face lineup for the match at WrestleMania. Yeah. But we'll see kind of how that plays out. But it was a great beatdown. It was great to see Cargill back. Triple H kind of mentioned that, her injury was kind of one of those ones where they didn't know exactly when she was going to be back. And he even said, we've had to kind of kick the can down the road, which kind of explains what happened with the women's tag division, where they were just constantly, moving that title reign down the road because they were waiting for Cargill to be in a position to get back. And timing actually worked out perfectly to bring her back for this. But again, don't want to forget the match. Belair gets the win. It was an excellent Elimination Chamber match to kick off the event. Poor Liv Morgan just took an absolute beating in that match again, but she came out looking like a star. It was great to see Alexa Bliss looking so strong. Bayley and Roxanne Perez obviously really good as well. But your overall thoughts on Cargill returning and then Belair getting the win at the end of the match?
Yeah, once they moved the tag titles on to Liv and Raquel, you felt, and Naomi and Belair both being in the chamber, you felt like now was the time to move forward with the story, finally. I had a feeling something was going to happen. I wasn't really banking on right at the beginning of the match. I think it worked out pretty well as far as getting Naomi out of the way and kind of creating some sort of adversity for Belair, because the visual, because Bayley exited the match fairly early.
Yeah.
So you're ultimately left with Belair versus several women who are noticeably smaller than her. It's hard to really rally behind her in that situation. So at least you give her this weird situation where she just saw Naomi get murdered essentially. Like there's emotions at play, and it kind of made it a little easier to want to see her succeed when otherwise she just looks like she's bullying a couple little girls. But Liv Morgan has been outstanding for like a year now. And if you would have told me that was going to happen in like the Riot Squad days, that she was, if you told me that only one of those three was going to be active with the company and in ring capacity in 2025, I probably would have picked her, but not because she ended up becoming such a great character and wrestler, but she's one of the best in the division right now.
Yeah.
And really impressed with her. You can tell every time Roxanne Perez is in the ring that they have really, really high, lofty ambitions for her, which is awesome as well. I really kind of thought Bayley might eliminate her to kind of get that win back, but that didn't happen.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious how they play out the rest of that feud. But yeah, I think, much like you, I think we need to steer the story into a Belair heel turn just to kind of make the Belair Rhea Ripley match feel a little more appetizing.
Yeah, and I still wonder, just because of a lot of reasons, whether this doesn't end up as a triple threat with Io Sky. Like, we're going to get some nonsense at the end of that title match on Raw tonight, and they're going to end up putting Io Sky in that match as well. The other option is you have Io Sky win tonight on Raw, and then you just have her give a rematch to Ripley because she's a babyface, and that's the thing you do. And you basically have her insert Ripley in the match, and then you can go any number of different ways with the three of them.
Sure,
because that could also facilitate the Belair heel turn. Because it's like, why did you agree to add a third person to our match? So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. We'll see. That's coming up tonight on Raw on Netflix. But yeah, I think a Belair heel turn would be good for her. It kind of aligns her with the Street Profits as far as their new attitude. And I think it makes gives her character another layer. You see what it's done for Liv Morgan and her character. I think it would really help, just add another layer to that character. But great match. It was a great way to kick off the event. Let's get on to the unsanctioned match. Obviously, you had the women's tag match in between. It was really just a match to allow Trish Stratus to get to wrestle at home. It was perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with it. It was basically your average television match. With Stratton and Stratus winning, which again, perfectly fine. Not really anything worth a lengthy discussion on. It was kind of a breather in this card. They allowed us to get to Zayn and Owens, and again, these guys really could continue to do this forever. If they wrestled like once a month, I'd probably get excited about it. It was brutal. It wasn't bloody. Evidently, pretty clearly they were saving that spot for Cody at the end of the event, which was kind of a bummer because not that I'm a big blood proponent, but these guys hate each other. I mean, Owens is stalking Zayn outside his house. It could have probably used it if you're going to have it, but that's neither here nor there. It really didn't take away from the match. It was great. It was brutal. Owens ends up getting the win finally, and just as he's going to finish Sami Zayn off, Randy Orton's music hits, and Orton comes back and is all set to punt Owens when the agents come running in and grab him and allow Owens to slide out. So clearly we're teasing that for WrestleMania. Thoughts on the match? Thoughts on Orton coming back? Because overall I thought the whole thing I was hoping Zayn would win, but I understand, especially with Orton coming back, why they had Owens win.
Yeah, I think the match pretty much played out the way I thought it would. I'm a little concerned about Randy Orton's inability to show up on time for these big events. You think back to the War Games match in 2023 when he showed up right at the end, which really kind of made the CM Punk return more strange at the end of that event. Because it's like, if you were going to do that, why didn't you have Orton just show up scheduled for the match?
Right.
Like, they advertised he was part of the team. Like, why did he wait till the last minute to show up? But, yeah, I had a feeling this was going to be kind of the return of Orton and then build for their match at WrestleMania, presumably. And I think we're not done, obviously, with Owens and Zayn. I think maybe that's another reason why you kind of not go all in on the blood, because there's probably going to be something even more ridiculous in the future. I've been saying for a while now that I think these guys need to headline a WrestleMania as opponents. We'll see how that plays out, but I think first off, Sami Zayn deserves a title reign, and those two guys have been so crucial to your company. I think in a time when kind of in the late teens when it was more fashionable to not stick around and maybe head to AEW, and before we kind of knew what that was going to look like, you were able to keep these guys around, and I think you kind of have to reward that eventually. Yeah,
for sure. And what a thought that just crossed my mind that I don't know if they would run with, but if you want to have a scenario where Owens ends up as your heel champion at the end of the year, maybe you have him be the one that turns on Cena and joins up with The Rock and basically, because he's crazy, like he can justify it in his head that I should be the guy, like you're going away, like, and then you basically have The Rock endorsing Owens, and then Zayn ends up winning the Rumble or whatever, and you could do that for next year, but love watching these guys go. They're two of the all-time best. It's amazing to me that not only have they had the success they've had in WWE, but now are thriving under Triple H, and I think Zayn will go away for a little while. It's the beginning of Ramadan. Makes a ton of sense. He wrestled on the first day of Ramadan, so he wasn't physically 100%, not being able to eat probably until after the match. But, this will give him a chance to maybe be off TV for a lot of this so that he doesn't have to deal with not having eaten all day. And so I think that's a really good move by WWE. And again, gets these guys in front of the Toronto crowd, which I think is always going to be a win. But yeah, Elimination Chamber was great. 10 out of 10. A lot of fun. Really, honestly surprised it was that good, but it really was that good. Well, let's quickly jump to a non-anime topic. And
non-wrestling.
Yes, non-wrestling topic, an anime topic. And this was something we had talked about a couple weeks ago on the podcast that AnimeEigo was going to be doing a series of anime business type of podcasts, if you will, video podcasts. And the first one was dropped at the end of last week with John O'Donnell, of course, the founder of Central Park Media. And this is just the Reddit post on it, but here's a little more on Central Park Media. Of course, they've long since gone away, but O'Donnell certainly one of the innovators in bringing Japanese animation to the United States. And the interview, which was done a couple of years ago, they kind of noted that it was in 2023 when these interviews were recorded, was really fascinating because you get to hear about his early days of doing this. He was working for a company out of Japan, and they wouldn't let him bring anime to the U.S. because they thought it would fail. And then when he started his own company, they were happy to license anime to him because when he fails, it's just going to be on him. Yeah. Japan looked at anime as lowbrow, low class. They didn't want to give low class, media to the United States. They wanted the paintings and, this amazing art to represent their country. No way they could have even remotely known what anime infiltrating the United States would do to the average American's opinion of Japan, because I think right now, if you're talking about the nerd culture, they look at Japan as like this place that like a mecca. They have to go visit Japan because that's where all their favorite media comes from. But everybody should check this interview out. It's part 1 with him, so I think we'll have another part drop soon. But I thought it was completely fascinating.
Yeah, it feels like in Japan, and I imagine it's probably the same over here, and certainly was back in the day. I don't think people understand just how you call an art form lowbrow, but really that just means accessible.
Yeah.
Like, I think when you consider what's popular over here, it's not the opera. It's not going to the symphony every weekend. Like, people do that, but it's like the mainstream entertainment is fairly lowbrow and working class.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that clearly, just based on this interview, a lot of people just didn't understand as far as what kind of market anime was going to eventually have over in the States. But it's wild hearing someone like this talk, because you think about from your own childhood just how the links they would go to not make you realize that something was animated in Japan, or even just not in the United States in general.
And the Dragon Warrior cartoon always comes front of mind, and it cost them that license because they went too far.
Or even like something like Transformers, that was very much a Western property that was still being drawn over there.
Yeah.
And ultimately they carried on with the cartoon long after we kind of dropped it. But Yeah, it's funny too when he makes a comment about how people thought of it as just such like smut essentially, and how when you think back to how they marketed anime over here, it was like they leaned into it. It was very much like the parental guidance labels on heavy metal albums in the 80s, where it was like, okay, you're gonna put that on my album, sweet, let me just lean right into this and sell even more as a result. I think the overall message, and it kind of makes you want to subscribe to their Patreon, because they mentioned there was like a full length discussion with this guy, and you felt like he probably could go on for days talking about the industry, and he had this book that he was chronicling a lot of this in, almost like he's ready to release his memoir. But my takeaway from it is ultimately that, and you kind of made the point as far as how this changed our perception of Japan. I think people need to realize that's what's appealing about anime.
Yeah.
Is that it isn't something we create. It's something created by another culture for another culture. And in that resonates elsewhere.
Yeah.
I don't need my anime to feel American. That's the last thing I'm looking for. I think creators and companies over here, especially, you need to kind of keep that in mind, that it's not about taking what they're creating and making it more like something we would create. It's how do you make it so I can understand it, so I can better appreciate what another culture's creating for themselves that I enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, everybody should go check that out if you're an anime fan, though there's going to be more episodes drop. I think it's going to be really fascinating to kind of go through all this. And some of these are things we've heard at conventions before, but I think having it all in one location really makes it an easy watch. And
I think sometimes some of these people have been maybe forgotten by like the convention community, where you don't bring in heavy hitters from the 80s anymore to talk shop. It's kind of like the lost era.
And some of them probably don't travel as much anymore.
Yeah.
They're getting up there in age. I mean, I don't O'Donnell, I'm not sure what his age is, but he's been around for a while. And this is a great way to kind of get to them without having to make them travel all over the country to do that. But really fascinating stuff. Central Park Media will always hold a place in my heart, because Slayer is one of my all-time favorite anime. Central Park Media, and they did an amazing job. Even that dub still really, outside of the first 13 episodes, that dub really holds up even to this day. So we'll definitely let you know when the next episode drops, and we'll talk about kind of our thoughts on it right here on the podcast. Are you ready to wrap this thing up with the Empire Express?
Let's do it.
Let's get this thing wrapped up. The Pokemon TCG trading card game Pocket has officially surpassed 100 million downloads within just 5 months of its debut. Does that surprise you? And is it still a fair measure on how popular Pokemon still is in 2025?
It's not surprising at all, and it's totally a fair measure of how popular Pokemon still is in 2025. The physical trading card game has enjoyed periods of crazy success over its years, and it only makes sense that a digital version on mobile phones, where you can periodically open packs for free and not have to battle scalpers and resellers, that's obviously going to be popular. Visual art / Key's upcoming anime Summer Pockets, based on the visual novel, will debut on April 7th in Japan. Are you interested in this one?
Yeah, unfortunately. I love Key's animation. If you've never watched one of their shows, they're usually hilarious and well-drawn and usually soul-crushing at some point. This is based on a game. They're bringing in Konami Suzuki to do the music for it, who did the music for the game, so I have a feeling the opens and ends are going to be really excellent. I'm definitely going to watch it until it breaks me, probably. More upcoming anime news, more cast members, and a new trailer were revealed for the upcoming new Hell Teacher Nube anime, which will debut in July. Great to see this one getting the remake treatment, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I really hope that interest in this remake will lead to the original anime receiving a license rescue and physical release. It's one that's been on my radar for a while, but there's really, to my knowledge, no legitimate means to consume it, and I'm really looking forward to it. It has some great music, and excited to see what they do with the remake. Thanks to an expanded deal between TKO and Western Australia, both the WWE and the UFC are expected to return to Perth. Early reports said by 2026, but at Elimination Chamber, the company said sometime in 2025. Makes sense from both sides, right?
Yeah, especially for Western Australia. It's an area of Australia that doesn't get a lot of big events because it's so far removed from the rest of the population center on the east side of the country. So it makes sense for them to continue to try to spend money to bring tourists to Western Australia. And again, TKO is just printing money at this point with WWE and UFC and I guess bull riding as well. So, yeah, totally makes sense for them to go back to Perth. Finally, it appears Major League Baseball will be partnering with another major anime franchise soon. Both the main MLB account, X account, and its MLB Japan account tease an announcement soon of a partnership with Demon Slayer. Are you surprised?
After the Boston Red Sox announced their One Piece theme day, I guess I can't officially be surprised at any subsequent announcements. I hope this one extends to all franchises and ballparks, including custom jerseys and hats like the One Piece Day. I could definitely see picking up a Cincinnati Reds Demon Slayer jersey.
It's never not a sentence I would have ever thought would have existed, but clearly there's a push right now to get the anime crowd involved in sporting events, as with like the Pokemon Go, and we had the Holo Live last year with the Dodgers. So why not? I think it could be a lot of fun. So we'll see when that news is supposed to come out, I think, on the 6th. So maybe we'll have that news later in the week. But that's going to wrap things up for this edition of the Nerdcast News Report. Great to have you along with us once again for another episode on this Monday. A lot of great stuff this week ahead of us. We've got another Nerdcast News Report coming up on Wednesday where we will update you on everything that happens in the early part of the week. And then, of course, over the weekend, we'll be back with another episode of the Hard Rock Empire. Thanks to everybody who's already checked that out. That'll be coming up on Sunday at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. And again, don't forget, Sunday we get the time change in the U.S. So if you're listening to our podcast, expect them to shift by 1 hour as we jump forward on Sunday. Big thanks to Rachel for joining us in the chat. Thanks to everybody for joining us today. A big thanks to Stoveleg Media for their continued support of our podcast. Big thanks to Mike for joining me on this Monday morning. Big thanks to you for listening whenever and wherever you are listening. That's going to wrap things up. We'll be back on Wednesday with another episode of the Nerdcast News Report. Until then, don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.